I was standing in a gallery in Chelsea, Manhattan, wearing the only blazer I owned, holding a glass of sparkling water I kept forgetting to drink, when it hit me that 4 months ago I was sitting in my mother's dining room being used as an example of what not to become. The gallery was white and tall and quiet in that specific way expensive rooms are quiet. Owen had hung all three pieces on the east wall together, which I hadn't expected, and seeing them like that, side by side, lit properly, breathing in a real space, made something in my chest go loose. Like a knot I'd been holding for 2 years finally decided it was done. People were stopping in front of them. Actually stopping. Not politely glancing the way people do at art they don't understand. Standing there, looking. I thought about Connie. I thought about her face across that Thanksgiving table in Espanola, the way she set her fork down like she was setting down her patience along with it. And I thought, she has no idea I'm standing here right now. She has no idea any of this exists. That's where the story really starts. Not in Chelsea. Back there. Back at that table. Thanksgiving in Espanola always smelled the same. Connie's cooking. Red chili, roasting garlic, something sweet in the oven that you could smell from the front porch before you even got the door open. She went all out every year, not because anyone asked her to, but because that table was hers. The good china, the candles, the tablecloth that spent the rest of the year folded in a cedar chest. She built that table the way some women build cathedrals. Slow and deliberate and full of meaning nobody else fully sees. I drove in from Taos that morning knowing I was going to say something. I'd been carrying it too long. Every holiday, every Sunday call, every time Connie asked what I was doing with my life, and I said something vague that satisfied nobody, including myself. I was 26 and I was tired of managing her feelings about a truth I hadn't even spoken out loud yet. Aunt Cheryl was already there when I arrived. She had this cheerful, relentless energy that I genuinely liked in small doses. She hugged me at the door and immediately asked about work, because Aunt Cheryl had two settings, warm and nosy, and they usually ran at the same time. I told her things were good. She patted my arm and moved on. Trent was on the couch, one ankle crossed over his knee, scrolling through something on his phone. He was 28, worked in finance in Albuquerque, and had this easy confidence that came from never having been told his ambitions were unrealistic. We got along fine. He was never mean to me a day in his life. He just existed in a way that made Connie hold him up like a measuring stick without him ever asking to be one. Lacey came in from the kitchen carrying a dish, already in her element. Second year of nursing school. Focused, capable, the kind of person who seemed to always know exactly where she was headed. She smiled at me and I smiled back, and we made the kind of small talk cousins make when they love each other from a distance. Dinner started the way it always did. Food passed around, overlapping conversations, the radio in the kitchen bleeding through the doorway. Connie was happy. She moved around that table, refilling glasses and adjusting dishes, and I watched her, and I thought, this is the hardest part about telling her the truth. Not her anger. Her happiness right before it. Aunt Cheryl asked somewhere between the main course and dessert. She leaned toward me with that bright, expectant smile. So Barbara, what's going on with you? You figure out your next move yet? The table didn't go quiet immediately. It sort of drifted that way as people picked up that something real might be about to happen. I put my fork down. Actually, yeah, I said. I've been thinking about it a lot and I know what I want to do. I want to paint. I want to pursue art seriously, like as an actual career. Connie's fork stopped moving. The quiet settled in fully then. Trent looked up from his plate. Lacey stilled. Aunt Cheryl's smile stayed on her face but shifted into something more uncertain, like she wasn't sure she'd asked the right question after all. Connie looked at me from across the table and her expression wasn't angry. I almost wished it was. It was something closer to exhausted, like I'd confirmed a worry she'd been carrying quietly and had hoped she was wrong about. Barbara, she said. Just my name, which in her mouth meant 100 things, none of them needed to be said out loud. Mom, I'm serious. I've been painting since I was a kid. You know this about me. Painting since you were a kid is not a career plan. It can be. She looked around the table then. Not frantically, not dramatically, just looked. Her eyes landed on Trent, on Lacey, and she gestured toward them with the kind of calm that comes from believing you are obviously right. Just look at your cousins, she said. Look at how fast they grew. Trent has his own place, he has a real income, he has stability. Lacey knows exactly where she's going. They made real decisions, Barbara. Decisions that lead somewhere. I kept my eyes on the candle in the center of the table. Art leads somewhere, I said quietly. To what? Struggling? To being 50 years old with talent nobody paid for? Her voice wasn't raised. That was almost worse. I know you have something in you. I've always known that. But having something in you doesn't mean the world is going to open a door for it. You need a plan that works in the real world. Someone at the table laughed. That reflex, uncomfortable laugh that people use to release tension when they don't know what else to do with it. It was short and quickly swallowed. But I heard it. I felt it land somewhere behind my ribs and stay there. I didn't argue after that. I didn't have the energy for a debate I hadn't been invited to win. I ate what was left on my plate. I helped clear the table. I hugged Connie at the door and drove back to Taos alone in the dark. The whole 45 minutes with the heat running and the radio off and my hands steady on the wheel, while everything else inside me was not. What Connie didn't know, what nobody at that table knew, was that 3 weeks before Thanksgiving I had signed a lease on a studio space in the Taos Arts Colony District. One big room, north-facing windows that caught the best light from mid-morning through early afternoon. Concrete floors, high ceilings, a bathroom barely bigger than a closet. The smell in there was turpentine and raw wood and something faintly mineral I could never fully identify, probably from the walls. I loved it from the first afternoon I spent in it. I had been working seriously for nearly 2 years by then. Large oil pieces mostly, heavily layered, textured in a way that took time and intention. I was pulling from the landscape around Taos, but not painting it literally, painting what it felt like to exist inside it. What it felt like to be a woman rebuilding herself quietly in a small town that the rest of the country drives through on the way to somewhere else. There was loneliness in the work, and there was also something stubborn, something that refused. Demi was the only person who knew any of it. We'd met working the same shift at the Cracked Cup on Bent Street, splitting tips and talking about everything we were eventually going to do with our lives. She was a songwriter, genuinely gifted, and she understood that specific terror of wanting something creative bad enough that the wanting itself feels dangerous. She'd come to the studio some evenings and sit on an overturned bucket with her guitar and play quietly while I worked, and neither of us would say a word for an hour, and it was the most settled I ever felt anywhere. She was there the night I finished the piece that changed everything. Big canvas, nearly 5 feet across. Ochre and deep blue and this thin thread of burnt orange running through the center like something cracking open from the inside. I stepped back from it and Demi stopped playing and we both just looked at it for a while. That one's different, she said. How? You stopped protecting yourself while you made it. She was right. Somewhere in the middle of that painting I had stopped trying to make something good and started just making something honest. The difference showed. It always does. I submitted 3 pieces to Owen Hartley's gallery in Chelsea in October. Found him through a chain of connections that felt almost too unlikely to follow. A Taos painter I respected had shown there. I emailed her not really expecting a response. She responded, she passed my name to Owen. He had a reputation for finding painters who were saying something the New York market hadn't quite heard yet. Collectors who came to his gallery came there looking, not just browsing. He replied in 9 days. He wanted all 3 pieces. I drove to the Cracked Cup, sat at the corner table and read his email until I had it memorized. Then I called Demi and had to hold the phone away from my ear for a full 30 seconds. The opening was on a Friday in February. I flew into JFK alone and took the subway into Manhattan because I needed the noise and the motion to calm me down. Owen had hung the pieces beautifully. The gallery was everything the studio in Taos was not. Polished and deliberate and full of people who knew how to look at things. I stood near the back for most of the night, watching. A woman in a gray coat stood in front of the large ochre piece for almost 6 minutes. I counted. Owen found me in the second hour. There's a collector, he said, quiet and unhurried. The 3 pieces together. She wants to make an offer on the full collection. The conversation happened in a small room off the main gallery. The collector was direct and certain the way people are when they already know what they want. When she said the number, $250,000, I nodded like I heard numbers like that regularly and excused myself to the bathroom where I stood over the sink with the cold water running and breathed until my hands stopped shaking. I drove to Espanola on a Sunday morning 4 months after Thanksgiving. I didn't call ahead. I needed to see her face. Connie was in the kitchen when I walked in. Coffee going, the small radio on the counter, Sunday morning exactly the way it always looked. She glanced up and something in her expression relaxed the way it always did when I walked through her door. This involuntary relief, before whatever was still unresolved between us came back into her eyes. I sat down at the kitchen table, the everyday one, the one where real things got said. "I need to tell you something," I said. She sat across from me and wrapped both hands around her mug. "I've been painting," I said. "Every day almost. I have a studio in Taos. I submitted work to a gallery in New York and the show already happened." I held her eyes. "I sold the collection, Mom. All three pieces together. $250,000. The radio kept playing some old song low and tinny. Connie didn't move. She stared at me with an expression I hadn't seen her direct at me in years. Not pride exactly. Something that came before pride. Recognition. "I'm not telling you this to prove a point," I said. "I'm telling you because I want you to actually know me. I want you to know what I've been building, and I need you to understand I'm going to keep going. However this sits with you." She was quiet for a long time. "I didn't know," she finally said. "I know. I was scared for you, Barbara. I know that too." She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Her hands are rough and strong, the hands of someone who worked hard her whole life with a different set of tools than mine. I didn't move. We sat in that kitchen and neither of us fixed everything, because some things don't get fixed in a single morning. But we were honest with each other in a way we hadn't been in a long time. The coffee went cold. The radio kept playing, and that was enough to start with.